We're going to, chapter 2, section 1, we're going to talk about linear and quadratic functions. That's nothing new to you guys, right? You should know that backwards and forwards, but we're going to do modeling. So modeling's a little different. We're going to start with the data and then write the equation to fit the data. So for example number 1, we're given the function f of x is equal to 4x cubed minus 5x minus 1/2. And it says which are, well, we're given a bunch of functions. So that's the first one, that's f of x. Then we're given g of x, which is 6x to the negative 4 plus 7. Then we're given h of x, which is the square root of 9x to the 4th plus 16x squared. And then k of x, which is 15x minus 2x to the 4th. And so the question is, which one of these are functions? And specifically, polynomial functions. So which are polynomial functions? So in order to say, so this is like a labeling thing, right? Because they're all functions, right? But polynomial is a specific family of functions. So what is a polynomial? Well, nomial is a term, and poly means many, so it's a function that has many terms. And usually it's written, usually it takes on a form like this. F of x is equal to a sub n x raised to the nth power, and then a n minus 1 x raised to the n minus 1 dot 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 all the way down to the last term, a sub 0. Okay? And we call this the leading coefficient. And usually this is the degree. If we write it in descending order, it's the degree of the polynomial. And we always choose the highest degree. So what we want to do is we always choose or write them in order by the power. So it might be, for example, I might say something like f of x is equal to 3x to the 5th plus 2x to the 3rd plus x minus 3. Now I did this on purpose. I skipped like x to the 4th power and x squared and things like that because we don't always have every power defined, but notice that they're written in order. So this would be what we call the leading coefficient, and this would be a 5th degree polynomial because that's the highest degree. So before we can even do that, are there any special requirements or anything that you see here as a polynomial that might limit one of these from being a polynomial? Well, what we need is, we know that there are some qualifications. So I think the first one is that n is non-negative. So when we look at this n, or the power, it has to be non-negative, okay? And that's about it. Oh, and a sub n cannot equal 0. So now let's look at this. When you look at f of x, is that a polynomial? Yes. it has the leading coefficient is 4, and it's a third degree polynomial because the highest power is to the third. What about g of x? Is g of x a polynomial? How many of you guys think that? Okay, you're shaking your head no. Why?
Because the degree is negative.
Because we have a negative. Okay. And we said the n is non-negative. So no negative powers. What about h of x? One thing I forgot to write down, when I said non-negative, it has to be a non-negative integer. And so when you look at h of x, really that's the same as this whole quantity raised to the 1/2. So technically that is no. Okay, because it's the same as 9x to the 4th plus 16x squared raised to the 1/2. If we wanted to get technical about it. Okay? And it can't be simplified. You might be tempted to think that you could push that through and take the square root. You can't. That plus sign, you can't simplify it. That's the way that it is. Okay? What about k of x? Is that a polynomial? Yes, it is. Positive powers of x. However, what's the leading coefficient? Well, we got two terms. So by show of hands, how many people think that the leading coefficient is 15? Raise your hands. How many people think that it's -2? It's -2. Why? Well, it's not written in descending order, but when you look at it, it's a 4th degree polynomial. Right? The highest power, this is x to the 1st power, this is x to the 4th power. If I were to rewrite this in descending order, I could write it as -2x to the 4th plus 15x, and then clearly we could see that -2 is the leading coefficient. And it's a 4th degree polynomial because x raised to the 4th is the highest power. Does that make sense? Good.